Lock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
Welcome back to another great episode of the First Case podcast. Chris Blevins and I are coming at you today to talk more about the things that we do in the operating room and why we do what we do. Or really, in this case, why we should be doing the things that sometimes we aren't doing. And we have a lot of different things that we're going to talk about today, but things that are crucial to patient safety, to infection prevention, and just to following the guidelines, recommendations, and rules that exist for the perioperative department. Right, Chris?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's just easy to get into a rut sometimes, or those habits that this is our 9 to 5, right? It's our daily thing. And if you get out of that habit, or you cut corners, or maybe you're at a facility where that wasn't a policy, you forget why it was important and why it's such a patient safety thing. So
yeah, why do I have to do this stupid thing that they're making me do? I don't understand. This is dumb. Well, yes. a lot of times what we think is a burden or cumbersome or annoying is actually rooted in something good. Now, that doesn't mean that maybe our practice could not be improved, because a lot of times practices could be improved because we've just always done it this way and we're always going to do it this way and everybody hates it. But the reason behind what we're doing is still solid, and we still need to be doing it in some way, shape, or form. So think about the different things that I think probably as a surgical tech and as a surgical tech instructor, you see a lot of different things that probably frustrate you because people don't necessarily think about the why or understand why they should be doing them a certain way. Let's think about one that I know gets under your skin. People gowning. I know, right? People gowning off the back table. How do you feel about that?
Oh man, let me tell you. Yeah. It is not the right thing to do for so many reasons. And it's not just because I am asking them not to have my student gown and glove off the back table. Yeah. No one should gown and glove off of the back table, period.
Why?
Because the back table is sterile from tabletop to tabletop. And you should maintain a 12 to 18 inch boundary from non-sterile to sterile. Right? So if I am not sterile, I should be at least 12 to 18 inches. I wish y'all could see me right now. 12 to 18 inches. I am, because I have to have my hands, right? Yeah. You have to maintain that distance between sterile and non-sterile. And so number one, if I am not sterile, and many packs, like there are so many excuses that I hear all over the country, right? The first one is that when you open a pack, it has many gowns within the pack, right? That's awesome. But there is a surgical technologist gown that is pre-wrapped that sits underneath the dust cover on the pack. Do you know why? Because you're supposed to take that off and you're supposed to set it on a Mayo stand or some other flat surface that's not the back table. And you're
Let's emphasize that. That's not the back table.
Right? And you're supposed, because you are to be gowned and gloved and, I repeat, turned before you go to that back table. So and people say, but there are lots of gowns, you're wasting a gown, right? Your student is wasting a gown. Let me challenge you with that, because if I have all of these things opened, right? These packs come with supplies and gowns, sometimes suture, sharps. The whole point is that it's preloaded, right? It's like a grocery cart that you didn't have to go and shop for, right? So it's like Walmart pickup, already ready for you.
And you didn't even have to go fill everything out online.
Exactly, right? And now I have made one stupid mistake and I've contaminated all of that money, all of that time and energy that was not supposed to be spent is now wasted. And you have to go and redo it all because you couldn't take 5 steps to the left and go find some other flat surface and gown and glove because you thought that you weren't going to ever make a mistake. So there's one reason. But also, if you gown and glove away from that back table and you have to turn before you get to that back table, because remember, the back table is only sterile tabletop surface. And our turn card, which, ladies and gentlemen, is a cool little paper card that's about the size of an index, and it's our neutral area between a non-sterile person and a sterile person so that you can take your bathrobe, basically, and turn in a little dance, right? Yeah. Spin like a 360 so that our gowns encircle us fully so that we are not exposing our scrubs to sterile supplies and instruments. But it takes a special technique. But guess where that turn card stands below your umbilicus, below your belly button. So if you are at tabletop and you belly up to it, your turn card is below the tabletop. And so now your sterile gloves that you worked so hard to put on, if you did it appropriately, away from the back table, have now come in contact with unsterile areas, and now you contaminated your gloves just to turn. So it's all about understanding sterile boundaries and doing the right thing. And before you go and touch thousands of dollars worth of instruments and supplies, but also so that you're not contaminating things that are going to be inside of a patient. But if you don't know the rules and know the why, then you're never going to change the things that are going on. And when I explain those things to the people that are doing it incorrectly, there's not an argument. And that's why it is my biggest pet peeve, because, and also, it's not just about a student who doesn't have the experience, right? It's about anyone. No one should be gowning off of the back table because you are too close as an unsterile person to a sterile environment. And also, why not allow, and I get that people need to use the supplies that are on the back table, then have a sterile person that appropriately gowned, gloved, and turned off the mayo, then come over and hand you a gown off of the pack. Like, we are taught to gown and glove others.
If we can help. We know how to do this.
We can help each other.
Yeah, right?
So, like, just take, after you've done everything the correct way, take the gown off the back table and nicely hand it to your teammate away from the back table. Like, this is not rocket science, but you have to know the why. We do what we do so that we can make good decisions that are best practice for our patient, and quit doing it because you're stubborn and you just think it looks cool. Like, it drives me crazy.
All right. So I have several questions for you, some that are probably going to irritate you more than others. But the first one's an easy one, I think, because you are the AST expert. Is there a guideline or a recommendation from AST that says not to do this?
Why, Melanie Perry, there is.
And where would we find it?
It's not just Chris Blevins gets mad, right? Yeah.
That could be a whole podcast by itself. Chris Blevins gets mad.
I don't think many people would listen to that. Yeah.
You'd be surprised.
So it was revised. It originally was in 2008. It got revised back in 2014 because AST, like ARN, goes back and reviews new research and revises their guidelines too, right? So it's the standards of practice for gowning and gloving. And it talks a lot about many different things. So, I just mentioned that our gowns are sterile and we try to make them circumferentially sterile, but really we have a very specific area, right? So in the front, axilla to umbilicus, up to 2 inches above our elbow. In my lab, I'm in Tennessee, it's nips to hips, by the way. So We're going to break that one down. Yeah.
Well, that gives you a good visual now, doesn't it?
Now, hey, who said a podcast wasn't visual? Yeah. But the AST guideline specifically says that a sterile gown should be off of a Mayo stand or a flat surface that is not the back table. Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. And so they do recommend a Mayo stand or like the prep table. Not that, it's not being used for other things, right, Nurse Perry? So
if I don't have all of my stuff on it. However,
exactly.
Any good circulator would gladly move their stuff if it was the only surface available and you needed to set your stuff up, because we all want to follow the rules and do it right. So
absolutely.
By all means. So then what about if there is no surface available and I open them up and lay them on the operating table? Can I put it on the bed and gown and glove off the bed?
Absolutely, because guess what? The bed's not sterile, and it's not the back table. So we use everything. I've used the top of a trash can because all of our trash cans have lids, Yeah. So anything, just not the back table, not where you're opening all of these supplies.
Makes a lot of sense.
It's just not best practice, and you are not sterile until you have gowned, gloved, and turned. Yes.
Oh, so good. All right. So I got another question though for you.
Yes, ma'am.
And maybe you've seen this in your years of experience. I have seen it more times than I want to admit, and I'm almost kind of afraid to tell you that it's happened. However, somebody's, we're setting up the case and maybe they are, reaching to grab their gown or their gloves off the back table and they touch the back table and they're like, oh, don't anybody put anything there. And they just put a couple blue towels over it and then they keep going. Have you seen that happen before?
If I was in the room, they probably didn't.
Well,
yeah. But
so why would we not want to do that?
Yeah, because it's contaminated.
So even covering up a small little spot I touched with the blue towels, not best practice.
Not best practice. Also, the patient's not even in the room yet. And we're not doing best practice. What we're going to do when the patient's in the room.
Exactly.
The blue towels, right? And let's talk about blue towels because I know that's one of your pet peeves, right? But the blue towels are permeable. If you shine one of those blue towels, you hold it up in the light, you can see through it.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Right. Yeah. So our back table covers, right? The things that, bacteria are microbes, right? Microbes you can't see through, the human eye. They can get through those holes.
Yeah, and as soon as that blue towel gets wet, things can just travel through.
Right? Yeah. We talked about it, right? Seal indicator date, strike through.
Yes, exactly.
So you never know. And then the blue towel's going to move. Or what happens if you have a teammate that is helping you? They don't know that blue towel's over there. I have seen things that have fixed areas of contamination, small areas when we are intraoperative. I've seen people put a Tegaderm over an area, right? Okay, that's non-permeable. It's adhesive. That is going to stay. That makes sense to me if you are in an area where you can't do that.
Well, yeah, and you're intraoperative. That's very different from before the case. And we just don't want to, one, admit that we did something we weren't supposed to be doing. And then two, we contaminated in the process. And now it's our fault that we're breaking down all of that equipment and starting over again, which is why it's quick, just cover it up. It'll be fine. Just nobody touch that spot.
Yeah.
And that's
maybe
not best practice.
Don't gown a glove off the back table in the first place. You don't have to worry about it.
There you go. So I don't know. I mean, that's a novel idea. Okay, but we're carrying this even one step further than that. Okay. What about, you've scrubbed in, you've gowned, glove, turned, you've done all your stuff, your table's all set up and ready, and they're about to roll in the room with the patient, but there's extra help. So you can just stay scrubbed in, just drag a sitting stool over and sit down and wait for the case to start.
Oh, man.
Is that a good idea?
Well. Okay. So remember our sterile area, right?
I know, nips to hips.
Nips to hips, right? So the whole point is to maintain that sterility at the operative level. And so remember when we stood up and we were belly up to our back table, right? Because I'm sterile, it's sterile, we're happy, we're one. So we are in unity with our instruments and we are working our working end and we're messing around with our non-working end and we're just getting it done. Well, what has been touching the lower end of the drape that a non-sterile person had touched in order to even open that procedure pack? The bottom half of my gown. And now I'm going, because we've seen those procedure stools. I'm 5'6". If I sit down in that stool, I'm now 4'2".
Yeah, exactly.
And so now I don't care what I've done. And I have, what is that lady on Saturday Night Live that like stuck her armpits?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She gets really excited.
Whatever. Yeah. And then she smells them. Like,
yeah.
Now you see scrubs like fold themselves into a ball and sit on these little baby stools. And so the bottom of your gown is now all up in your nips and hips. And that was contaminated. So, and I get it. Like I was a trauma scrub. I did liver transplants. I remember the hurry up and wait game. I also remember being in the operating room at 2:00 in the morning, standing there and waiting. Like, yes, are you tired? Like, I could literally stand with my head just on the wall and I could probably fall asleep. Like, I remember those days.
Right.
But sitting down in a stool changes the operative level, causing contamination. Then you're going to stand up and you're going to get next to sterile items, your sterile drapes, your patient's anatomy. These are just areas that are gray. And at the end of the day, gray doesn't cut it in the operating room. We're blue and we're red. So,
you're absolutely right. I mean, obviously, if we're doing a hand case and we're all sitting, it does change this conversation significantly. But just the general, let me go sit down and wait because I've got a minute and I'm going to fold up myself all over, and contaminate and then stand back up to operate. That's a different story.
If the entire operative level changes, then we're cool. Everybody sit down. I used to love a good AV fistula. Those were the days. We're all sitting down. It's a hand case. I'm holding a Vessi loop. Like we're having a chill day.
Yeah.
Man, diabetics, come on. But right now, but if everyone is at the same operative level, we're golden. But if we're gonna get back up to a standing height,
if it's gonna be musical chairs, we're gonna sit up and sit, stand up and sit down. Yeah.
Yep, that's a big old Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, as we just move along and talk about all of these things that we see in practice, or maybe that I see in practice and I shouldn't be telling you, let's talk about double gloving.
Yes.
Should we? And why?
Oh my God. Okay. Yes, and yes. Right.
Yeah.
And you and I both see this, and I think it's one of those foundational things that if you practice it from day one and then just never stop, that you will never get out of the habit. But I think, that's one of those tactile things. And some people, it's hard if you've only been single gloving and then you go to double gloving, it's a hard habit to break, right? But the solution to pollution is dilution.
Excellent. Just like an educator would say.
Yes,
keep going.
Yes. And that is what it is. So there are two reasons. Number one, we wear certain gloves on the bottom and certain gloves on the top. And so you may have seen gloves that are blue or green or, a different color. We call those indicator gloves. They're typically a little slicker, which is nice because
I like indicators.
Yeah,
I like
they're
how
awesome.
they feel. Mm-hmm.
But the reason we wear those on the bottom and then a normal latex or kind of what that eggshell, right, egg crate, whatever color on top is because they are a wonderful indication of a hole in your glove. And I actually show my students this. I can actually show you. I'll send you a video. There's a video of me doing it. But what we do is I'll take a very small hypodermic needle, like a 25 gauge, and I'll just nick the very top of my double glove, right? So I have the white glove over a blue glove. I'll just nick it. You can't even see the hole. And most of the surgical sutures and hypodermic needles that we use are very, very tiny. So poke it a little bit. But if that gets wet, so I'll take my gloves and I'll just put it in a kidney basin full of water, just move it around a little bit. Next thing you know, that blue will stick where the water seep through that hole, and it's just like glowing. You can see that blue through the white. That's a massive indicator that there is a hole in my top glove. So it protects us from, it's
that visual indicator that
absolutely
we had our glove has been compromised. And what's actually really interesting, because I know that both AST and AORN both have guidelines on double gloving. For AORN, it's the guideline on sharp safety, actually. In the guideline, it talks about how double gloving significantly decreases sharps injuries. And they said that, glove perforations are reduced by 71% when wearing 2 pairs of gloves compared to wearing only 1, according to some recent studies and trials on double gloving. And so AORN does recommend double gloving for preventing potential exposure to bloodborne pathogens if a sharps injury occurs. Because if I get stuck with a needle or a suture and I'm double gloving, my risk of actual injury is significantly reduced because it might go for the first glove, but the second glove stops it. And if I've only got on 1 glove, then I don't have as much protection. And that color of the indicator underneath lets me know immediately, oh yeah, that did go through. Hold up, I'm going to break. I'm going to go make sure I'm good. And I'll be back,
Yeah, and I'm going to grab that contaminated needle with me so it doesn't go into my patient,
Right, and get that off the table as well.
Yeah.
So,
well, and they act like a squeegee. Right. So if we're thinking of like the squeegees we use on our windows, if a needle that has contaminated blood, and that's why we call them standard precautions, because, we don't know necessarily if our patients have some sort of communicable disease. Right.
Right. So, absolutely.
So if a bloody needle goes through 1 layer of this squeegee, right, this latex, then certain amount of those blood cells, right, or those microbes are going to be wiped away. Now, imagine how many of those blood cells are going to be wiped away when it went through 2 layers of latex before it ever poked through your biggest layer of immunity, right, your skin. So there's less chance of those microbes in that blood cell to expose you. So it's safer for the patient, safer for you. But if you start that habit from day 1, which you'll never guess whose students start that habit from day 1.
I'm not surprised at all that Chris Blevins students have to double glove. Yeah. But it's also going back to the importance. Double gloving is a safety feature for our staff. It is to keep us safe, to prevent exposure to pathogens, to microbes, to disease. It is something that is there to help keep us safe. But it's very important when we think about why we're double gloving. Also, like you mentioned, the technique of double gloving. I mean, I can double glove and I can wear two of my size 7 just over gloves. I guess I could wear 2, but they're the same color and they're not exactly going to show me very much if I got stuck. That's why we have that different colored indicator. It's so important.
Well, and there's so many gloves too, like you, Ortho Queen.
Yeah.
You guys have.
I love orthos.
Oh man, somebody needs to. It's not this girl, right?
Unless you get the size that's too small, and then you look like a Tyrannosaurus Rex trying to be at the back table.
Because the equipment that is used in orthopedics, it's so heavy, and the saws and the drills, and it is very easy to get something snagged on there.
Oh yeah.
And that doesn't just protect you guys; it protects the patient because we could have communicable diseases too.
Yeah, yeah, and it gets snagged on us. We contaminate it. Maybe it doesn't get caught. They don't realize or something. And hopefully that's not the case.
God forbid it's the favorite rongeur of that particular surgeon on that day.
Yeah. Or I had a surgeon who called me into his OR one time. This has absolutely nothing to do with double gloves. It has everything to do with favorite instruments. But his instrument had been, I think I've told this story before too, but his instrument had been over sharpened. And so his favorite curved osteotome was no longer curved. And he calls me into the room. He's like, Melanie, this is my favorite curved osteotome. Do you see what's wrong with my favorite curved osteotome? I'm like, it's straight. He goes, yes, fix it. I'm like, well, let me order a new one because we can't curve that anymore. But anyway, that's just
bless his heart.
Different story for a different podcast. Let me just see what I can do real quick. But anyway, but yeah, God forbid, it's a favorite instrument that they have to have for their case. But ultimately, it keeps our patients safe. It keeps us safe. And those safeguards are there for a reason. And that's what we're talking about today, is the reason why the safeguards are in place.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. I think we have come to the end of this conversation. I think we made a list of at least 4 more things we wanted to talk about, and that was a little overambitious of us. So maybe in another episode, we'll get some more of them. You are the educator, and you have done most of the educating on this episode. So let me pass the mic back to you. You got anything else you want to just add before we wrap up today?
I think the biggest thing is if you're not sure why you do something or if somebody questions it, don't always be so rushed to judgment to just say no or this is the way we do it. Melanie and I both pointed out to some great resources today. AST, which is the Association of Surgical Technologists, AORN, which is the AORN,
the Association of Perioperative Registered Nurses.
AORN is AOR, the voice of God for nurses.
It is. It's the voice of God in the OR.
In the OR, yes, but absolutely. But the whole point is that there are resources out there for you to go and look up the best practice. And it doesn't just say this is the guideline, but it also has the rationale behind it and the different research that you can go and check out for yourself. But there is always a why for everything that we do. And the why is to keep you safe, to keep your patient safe. It's not just to make life harder. And if you just stop and think about it, most of the things we're telling you to do today are not harder.
Yeah. And really probably not what you were taught to begin with.
Yeah, just do it like your teacher told you to from the beginning.
And everybody will be so much happier, including Chris Blevins.
Thank you.
All right, that is going to do it for Chris's soapbox and today's conversation. I really do hope that you have been enlightened by the things that we've talked about today and hopefully inspired to maybe improve some practices if there were things that we talked about that aren't the way you are already doing them. On behalf of Chris, myself, and our whole team, thanks for tuning in to this episode of First Case.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to First Case on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for First Case in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. We look forward to hearing from you.